webinar for this week, this month. Good morning, hi, welcome along. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. Very grateful for you joining us on the webinar today. Today's webinar is about technology as a collaboration enabler. For those of you who haven't met me before, my name is Graham Gerstenberg. I'm CEO of Magical Learning. And again, I'm very grateful to be on the call with you today. Before we dive into the content, I would like to start the session by formally acknowledging the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and their continuing connection to land, community and culture, and pay my respects to elders past and present. Now, for those of you who may not have used Zoom, I'm sure there are a couple of people out there somewhere. It has become almost ubiquitous, hasn't it? If you are joining us, regardless of the device that you're joining us on today, there is a toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom window. Probably a couple of important buttons there for you to be mindful of. First is the chat function. So at any point during the webinar, if you have questions, comments, insights, etc., that you would like to share, please feel free to use the chat box and I'll keep an eye on that throughout the webinar. The other one is the reactions button, which is my favorite as a facilitator, because that's the one that enables you to both give a thumbs up and or applaud, which I am more than grateful to receive at any point continuously throughout the webinar, just to let me know that, yes, my jokes are funny, or this is helpful, or you like my bow tie, which comes to you from Tasmania, Australia, made by a very clever young man by the name of Ed Woods, and it's made of Tasmanian timber. Just in case you didn't know, now you do. You should go and buy one when you're able to travel, obviously, etc. All right, let's talk about today. Today's webinar, we're going to discuss collaboration. So again, the theme is technology as an enabler of collaboration. But we're going to talk about collaboration, what it means today, and more importantly, why it's so important for us in an organizational context. How technology can help us collaborate better, and better in part can mean understanding better when we should collaborate and perhaps when we should not. We're also going to talk about the cost of not collaborating for organizations, for teams, for individuals within those teams. What is it costing us when we continue with the old silo approach, for argument's sake? And then we share some tools and techniques with you to help use technology as a collaboration enabler. So some specific things that you can do to leverage technology wherever you are to help create more frequent, more relevant, more appropriate, and more effective collaboration. That's the plan. Quote for today, we have a couple along the way, but I do like quotes. And this is from Walter Isaacson. By the way, if you haven't read, Walter is an author. The book that I remember most when I think about Walter Isaacson was his biography of Steve Jobs from Apple. Most of the collaborations of technology were done by teams. Another thing to think about, collaboration is key to creativity. Our company does a lot of work on creative thinking and innovation in organizations. And one of the amazing things that happens just about every time we run a workshop is where we have the opportunity to create a safe space for people to feel that they can think creatively and come up with completely left field solutions or ideas without being judged. Creativity goes, it's off the charts. So collaboration often is the key to creativity. Before I get into the content in full, I would like to start with the question, and this is for everybody on the call this morning. Again, I'm happy for you to unmute yourself and share via audio, or I'll give you a couple of minutes now to perhaps jot your thoughts into the chat box. Why is collaboration at work important to you today? So I'll give you a couple of minutes now to jot your thoughts into the chat. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. So let's talk about what collaboration actually is. And here are some similar but subtly different definitions. Typical dictionary definition: collaboration is working with someone to produce something. A little bit vague, but we get the idea. Working jointly with others, especially in an intellectual endeavor. And perhaps the one that sort of resonated most for me was from Deloitte. Employees communicating and working together, building on each other's ideas to produce something new or do something differently. I like that most out of the three because it touches on the value of leveraging everyone. So if you're talking about collaborating as two or more people, even if it's just two, one of the real benefits can be leveraging the combined, the collective knowledge, wisdom, creativity, innovation, experience, etc., of those two people, rather than just me saying, well, we're going to do it this way. So communicating, working together. Why is collaboration important? Why does it matter today? Well, here are some pretty helpful ideas as to why it can be a good thing to do. Firstly, it can help realign teams working remotely or working from home. And when I say realign, mindful of the context of the pandemic, the COVID-19 thing, and the fact that in the last 5 or 6 months, vast numbers of people across the planet have been forced into removing themselves from an office and working from home. Now, in some cases, it might have been a voluntary thing and they might have been quite happy to do it. In a lot of cases, it wasn't so much voluntary as mandatory. So we've had teams that have been working together in organisations in the same space, in the same office building for a number of years. And we build rapport and trust and processes and communication tactics, etc., around that. And then suddenly we find ourselves completely separated. Certainly still able to communicate, still able to connect, but it's a very different feel on a team. So collaboration is one of the ways we can help realign the team on the things that matter. Again, we do a lot of work on helping lead remote teams, and one of the important things for team leaders, managers, supervisors, is helping to get the team to refocus on what's important, on work goals, etc. So collaboration is one way of doing that. Collaboration also fosters creativity and innovation when it's done right. So when we can collaborate from a trust basis, and on some level, sometimes collaboration also requires us to be a little vulnerable in accepting or at least acknowledging that somebody may know more about a particular topic than we do. Someone might have a better idea, someone might have more experience, someone may be way better at this than we are. We need to be able to trust and accept that their idea, just because it's better than ours, or it's not just because, if they have a better idea than ours, that's when we should be vulnerable enough to say, that's a great idea, let's run with it. So collaboration doesn't necessarily work where we can't trust and where we can't necessarily be open to someone having different ideas. It can also reconnect teams with the bigger picture, with the strategic vision for the organisation, much as it can, again, realigning a team that's now working remotely or working from home. In terms of realigning them on what matters to them, it can also help get them refocused on what really matters for the organisation. And this is particularly relevant when we're looking at collaboration across teams or across business units or work units. So one of the things it can do is help each of us have a better understanding or a better awareness of the team goals, but also the organisational goals and strategy. Collaboration can also help increase learning and skill sharing. Again, we're done correctly. So by collaborating, again, with say a team or somebody else from another team or from another work area, there's an opportunity for us to share experience, knowledge, skills, ways of doing things, ways of understanding how the organisation works. And when we're open to it, when we're comfortable enough in our own skin to be accepting that somebody else may actually know more about this than I do, that's a beautiful opportunity for us to share. Most of the time, collaboration works best when there is a two-way, at least two-way sharing of skills, knowledge, and information. But having said that, there are also times when it's okay to collaborate with another person or another team because they have greater experience and knowledge, and we really need to leverage that, provided we position the collaboration opportunity the right way so that they're clear. What we're really doing is, I want to pick your brain because I know you've got a lot of experience in this, and if I can use that experience in putting together this proposal, I think we've got a really good chance of winning the business, whatever it happens to be. So increased learning and skill sharing. The last benefit I wanted to touch on briefly was the simple fact that organizations that foster collaboration, It's Wednesday. It's say the wrong word day. Should be International Say the Wrong Word Day. Organizations that foster and encourage collaboration typically report higher levels of employee engagement and also higher levels of job satisfaction. Because one of the things that both predates, or it's a prerequisite for really effective collaboration, but it's also a byproduct or an end result of it, is trust. We need some level of trust in order to collaborate, particularly across teams to start with. But the act, the process, the function of collaborating over time actually builds and strengthens the trust within a team as well as across work units. So, and that often, again, leads to higher engagement and more job satisfaction because I feel that I am contributing to something that is bigger than just my role and or my team's role. A couple of stats, and you know, we're partway through the webinar and I haven't yet shared a graph with you. So here's a graph. This is a study, this is an internal study that Cisco ran, again, looking at the benefits or perhaps the impact of collaboration within their organization. And what they found was that at every level, across most of the business functions within Cisco, collaboration garnered greater, better results, improved results. And what they found, so if we look at this graph and think that the numbers on the left-hand side are a measure of improvement across trust, communication, effectiveness, productivity, quality of work, profitability, everything went up. And the more people collaborated, the better the results became. So you can see the difference between a basic collaborator and an intermediate collaborator, not that great. But when you go from intermediate to advanced, and these are people who are working consciously, continuously to look for opportunities to collaborate, the benefits to them are substantial. Excuse me. One other study run by Deloitte. Deloitte being Deloitte, they like to measure things. It's important, and it is in a lot of respects. One of the things that Deloitte found in their own study on collaboration is they equated effective collaboration to being worth $2,500 per employee in terms of profitability for the company. So if somebody came along and tapped you on the shoulder, if you were a business owner, or even if you were just a team leader in an organization and said, look, you've got a team of 6 here, here's $1,500 for your team of 6. You don't have to do anything else. Would you take it? Most of us would say, yes, please, as long as it was real money. So what Deloitte's study found was that, again, collaboration leads to, in addition to a whole bunch of other benefits, there are also some financial rewards for the organization, provided it's done well. And that in itself is probably a good segue into the next part of this morning's webinar, which is about the costs of not collaborating, the costs of poor collaboration. Again, a study published by Deloitte equates or puts the cost of No collaboration, poor collaboration in organisations at around $56 billion annually. That's a global cost. So it's not a small amount of money. One of the other costs internally within an organisation from poor collaboration or low levels of collaboration is there's less trust. And where there's less trust, typically there's less communication, there's less sharing of information, there's less productivity, less quality of work, less engagement. Everything's impacted. Poor collaboration or no collaboration often also leads to inefficiencies. And there's probably one of the more public examples or case studies, if you like, of lack of trust, inefficiency, and particularly poor communication was General Motors in the US, the car manufacturer, who had the short story is a production fault with an ignition system for motor vehicles. Apparently some of the people working production lines knew that there was a problem, but because there was low trust, low communication, and there hadn't been a culture of collaborating across teams and working together across teams, nobody ever raised it as a problem, nobody talked about it, nobody did anything about it until things went pear-shaped, accidents occurred, vehicles imploded, exploded, lives were lost. It cost GM, I think about $2.5 billion, but you know the numbers sort of insignificant next to the lives lost anyway. But it's such a beautiful poster child for the reasons why collaboration is so important. But again, I come back to the trust thing as well. The trust is the foundation stone, if you like, for collaboration. If we don't have trust, we won't collaborate well, we won't communicate well. Some of the other things from poor collaboration, we often tend to get lower quality outputs. And often in larger organizations, we can actually find that we have separate teams doing exactly the same work. So we get redundant work. We have a lot of duplication, again, because there's no culture of collaboration. We don't talk about what we're doing. We don't share what we're doing, who's doing what and why. And often we also don't use, and this is something we'll touch on a little bit later in the webinar, we also often don't think about how we can use technology to actually measure the process and the outcomes and the effectiveness of collaboration within an organization. And probably the last cost there is little or no innovation. Collaboration typically fosters, so if it's done well, can foster creativity and innovation within an organization. Steve Jobs, as a leader of people, probably not great. As a visionary, off the charts. Great things in business are never done by one person, they're done by a team of people. And Apple may not be the company that it was when Steve was around, but they still achieved some absolutely remarkable things. And if you look at Steve Jobs and think, well, he was Apple, I don't know if you've read or listened to the audio version of his biography, the one that Walter Isaacson wrote. Steve Jobs was supported by phenomenal teams, and the only reason Apple became Apple is because of all of the people in Apple, not just Steve. I'm going to pause for a second now because even though I like the sound of my own voice, I'd love to hear from you. So I have a question for you. And again, I'd love for you to either unmute yourself and share through audio or drop your thoughts into the chat box. What's the best advice or tip that you've ever heard about workplace collaboration? Awesome. Lil, great to see you on the webinar today. Thank you. Welcome along. And yeah, wonderful. Everyone has a perspective. So, important collaboration that we acknowledge that everybody has a voice, everyone has a perspective. Whether we agree with it, believe it or not, doesn't matter. It is important in a collaboration, particularly group collaboration, that we create a space where everyone can feel safe to share their thoughts, to share their perspective without feeling judged. Judgment is one of the probably quickest ways to kill the collaboration effort. Also, one of the quickest ways to kill trust. Between two people at work, between a team or within a team, across teams. So acknowledging that everyone has a perspective. Awesome. Thanks, Lil. So for me, probably the best thing I have read, seen or heard about collaboration in the last decade is, and it's something I was going to touch on a little bit later, it's not a guaranteed win. It wasn't couched in quite those terms, but collaboration is not always the best thing to do. Because I think over time we have come to look at collaboration as a panacea for all of the challenges, problems, issues, opportunities facing us in the workplace, and that's not necessarily the case. Alrighty. So let's talk about 4 tools or techniques that you can use to boost collaboration primarily through technology. It's the theme for the webinar today. The first of those is communication. So leveraging technology to improve, enhance, boost communication. And this is not just frequency of communication, but effectiveness. How do we measure effectiveness? Great question. What are the outcomes we get after the communication is done? So do we get the information we wanted? Do we get the response? Do we get action that comes out of it? And is it the right action or is it good action? Frequency is really easy. It is to some extent easier, so much easier to just communicate more frequently with others. But what we really need to do is make it more effective. One of the ways we can do that, leveraging technology, is through virtual meetings. Yes, in the last 4 or 5 months, most of us have become Zoom devotees. Some of us not so much. Zoom fatigue apparently is now a thing for many of us. And it's not just Zoom, obviously, but virtual meetings. There's so much tech available to help us to make it so easy for a team that is perhaps working from home or is working remotely to collaborate, to share knowledge, information, experiences, insights, perspectives, ideas. The beautiful thing about virtual meetings, and we've covered this in some of our other webinars, is video trumps written communication 99.732% out of 100. Yes, I just made that stat up, but it sounded impressive. Video is better than written. So video is way better than email. Video is way better than SMS. Probably not a handwritten letter. I quite like them, but for most of the time, video works. So use the technology available. You can get a free account on Zoom and set up meetings that run for 45 minutes with 20 people. It doesn't cost you anything other than your time. Use platforms like Teams, like Skype, Slack, WebEx, GoToMeeting. There are so many platforms available, but they all enable us to connect. I can look at somebody at the other end of the screen. And whilst it's not the same as being in the same room as that person, it is the next best thing. So think about how you can increase the use of technologies such as Zoom, etc., to have more virtual meetings where necessary, to be able to connect face to face. By the way, you can do this as have a virtual coffee with your team members. If you want to collaborate, if you want to share information, if you want to share ideas, if you want to pick someone's brain, just pick up the phone and call them or send them an email or send them a text and say, hey, can I buy you a virtual coffee at 10 tomorrow morning to have a chat about X? And then just set up a Teams meeting or a Skype or a Zoom meeting and have a chat with the person. A couple of things about virtual meetings too. Just keep in mind that, again, this is important from a trust perspective. If you are doing a video meeting with someone else, hugely important to get the sound right as best you can. So I have a headset on today. Is my favorite. I got new earpads for it a little while ago. Very exciting. I know you don't care, but I do. make sure your sound is as good as you can get it. If you're relying on the built-in microphone on your laptop, for argument's sake, try and ensure that there's not a lot of peripheral sound around you, and try and make sure that the laptop is reasonably close to you. Sound is very important. If I'm having a conversation with somebody and I can't understand them, the sound is muted, it's muffled, it drops in and out, psychologically, I'm less inclined to trust them. That's massively, massively damaging to our ability to collaborate. So sound is important. Lighting is also important. If I can't see, so if this is a video call, but I can't really see your face properly, the lighting's really dodgy, or you've got too much light coming in from behind you and it looks like you've got literally the halo thing happening, but it distorts everything else, that's also potentially going to impact on how much I feel inclined to want to trust you and to want to collaborate with you. So even little things like that. If you're going to use a platform like Zoom or Teams or Skype, understand the platform as best you can as well. If virtual meetings are not really an option for whatever reason, then look at communicating through something like a chat. Again, Teams is a great chat function, so does Zoom, Skype. A lot of the corporate Office packages have an inbuilt chat function. I think before Teams was expanded to the platform it is today, Microsoft used to have, was it Link? I'd probably steer clear of the social media chats. Anything that's going to actually drag me online to be engaged in social media, probably not. But where possible, chat is definitely better than email. It's more immediate, it's more informal, generally faster, and a chat literally is the online equivalent of what we would do if we were sitting next to one another, having a chat about work stuff. Some of the other great things about technology, screen sharing, again, Teams, Zoom, Slack, WebEx, most of those platforms enable screen sharing. So I can be working on something, I can bring somebody else in the team, and they could be the other side of the country, or they could be in Sydney, I could be in Melbourne, but excuse me, but we can share screens, share knowledge, share information, and the visual thing works so much better for some people than just talking about it. Email, your group mailbox is another great way of sharing information and collaborating. I would look to minimize the use of email wherever possible. It has become, there are still more email users in the world than there are social media users. One study found that we spend somewhere between 2 to 3 hours a day checking emails. Every email that comes in potentially robs us of 20 minutes of productive time. So I'd try and minimize email use wherever possible. But if we do need to use it, can we set up a group mailbox so that everybody who's collaborating on this project or this task, this work, has access to the same information at the same time? Another really great piece of technology that you can use to leverage collaboration is shared calendars. So simply giving other people access to my calendar so that they can see what I'm working on and when I'm available, when I'm not available, there's an inherent trusting automatically built into that. So technique number 2 is around building trust. We've talked in some of our other webinars about some of the studies that have been done in the last 20 or 30 years on how to get better performance out of teams, how to make more effective organizations. Stephen Covey was one example, and probably more recently, the Project Aristotle work that was done by Google. Patrick Lencioni, who wrote The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, all talk about the value and the importance of trust as the foundation, the cornerstone for creating more effective teams. And one of the ways that we can build more trust with others is to share more information with them. So rather than adopting the mindset that, well, if I give you everything I have, if I share everything I know with you, what happens if you get better than me at it? Because then my job's at risk because you might take my job because you're better at it than me. So I'm just going to keep like 5% of what I know, and it's a really critical 5%, but I'll hang on to that because that keeps my job safe. What we really should be doing is sharing everything we can in the hope that I can bring somebody up to the point where they can do my job better than me, because that means I can go off and do something else. That's exciting. So using technology, again, to share our knowledge, our skills, and whether it's through the chat, whether it's virtual meetings, whether it's the dreaded emails, whether it's just sharing documents and collaborating on documents online. Some of the tools and platforms available today in organizations, things like Office 365. There's a seriously impressive number of apps that you can plug into Office 365 in addition to all the stuff that's there natively. If you're not an Office person, you're on the Google platform, so the G Suite business apps, same deal. Platforms like Slack, Trello, relatively new but hugely popular. Asana is another really good online teamwork collaboration platform that makes it really easy for us to share information about work, about goals, about ideas, and do it in an effective, relatively efficient way. One of the other things to think about in terms of building trust is to be a little more considered, a little bit more deliberate about who you approach to collaborate with. So rather than just, collaboration's, it's the best thing we can ever do, I should collaborate with everyone, think a little bit more critically about, should I collaborate with someone on this project? And if so, who would be the best person or persons to collaborate with? If you go to somebody wanting to collaborate with them and you can show through your approach that you've actually given this some thought and you have some valid reasons as to why you believe it would be good to collaborate with them, that's brilliant. But if it just becomes, I think it'd be a good thing to do because I'm not sure what I should be doing, so maybe I can just pick your brain and you can do some of it for me, that sort of approach might not build trust as well. So number 2 is build trust, and we can use technology to do that. Number 3 is leverage the systems that you have available to you, and whether you know about all of these systems or whether you can find out about them depends, I guess, on where you are. One of the things we can use technology for is to help monitor and measure both the activity that we get involved with when we're collaborating with others, but also the outcomes. Because the belief that collaboration per se is automatically great for the company isn't quite true. And there have been, again, studies. There was a Harvard Business Review article a couple of years ago that looked at collaboration efforts within one company where teams were getting together to work on business proposals, responses to tender requests. And what they actually found was that the team who was primarily responsible for putting the bid together, they decided that they should collaborate with other teams because maybe they've got some better perspectives or different perspectives on it. But what they found over the course of 18 months was that after they'd started collaborating with these other teams, their success rate actually went down rather than up. But they weren't monitoring or measuring the outcomes of the collaboration, so we just kept doing it anyway. Another powerful use of systems is to share lessons learned. So if you've ever worked in a project management space, one of the common things we do at the end of a project is we do a post-implementation review or a project review, and we look at lessons learned. What was good, what worked well, what didn't work so well, what should we definitely do next time, what should we stop doing, what's something we should start doing, that sort of stuff. Using technology not only to monitor performance, to document things like lessons learned, but then also to share those lessons learned is hugely important. Now, whether you work in an organization that has an online document management system like Trim or Objective or something like that, or whether it's simply a shared drive or SharePoint if you're on Office 365, think about how we can use the technology that is available to us today to share important things like lessons learned. We can also use technology to identify new opportunities to do things differently if we're using some of that technology to actually measure, monitor what we're currently doing, what's working, what's not. And one of the other ways that we can use systems is to bring a halt to inefficient collaboration. But this, again, requires us to have some plan in the first place to actually monitor and measure the outcome of the collaboration, rather than just assuming that because we're collaborating, whatever we get out of it must be good. And one of the probably a helpful question, if you like, for asking yourself before you decide to collaborate with somebody else is, will that collaboration add value or detract value from, let's call it, a project, rather than just blindly going in because collaboration is a good thing. The last tool / technique, this is probably more of a technique, is around our level of proficiency with technology. Acknowledging that technology can enable more collaboration, can enable better collaboration, provided we understand enough about the technology to be able to use it effectively. So, and I touched on this earlier, learn how to use the apps. If you are a regular user of Zoom, how much don't you know about what Zoom can do? What are some of the tools available within Zoom that can actually make our collaboration efforts better? Same with Microsoft Teams. So if we're having a team meeting on Teams, or if we're doing in Zoom, can we use the whiteboard function? Can we share the screens? If I've got a team meeting going, I can actually have a document or documents available through one of the channels on Teams. We can open those documents during the meeting. We can be brainstorming during the meeting on that document, so we can have multiple people working on the same document at the same time. It's the online equivalent of having a bunch of people in a meeting room with a whiteboard, but it can be much more structured and infinitely more expansive than just a whiteboard. So learn how to use the apps that you're using. If you're not sure about the technology, if you're a relative newbie, or you're just too busy most of the time and you don't really have time to engage in learning how to use the tech, can you find a guru at work, or perhaps a friend or a colleague, somebody that you know who is actually quite knowledgeable about that platform? Offer to buy them a virtual coffee with donuts or a hot chocolate with 3 marshmallows, and pick their brain. It's a different type of collaboration there. One of the other things that you can do, which is wonderful in terms of encouraging others to think about collaborating, is to share what you know or share what you learn about technology, and particularly about using technology to foster collaboration. Share that with others. It's almost like the pay it forward approach. Because as we start to learn and understand more about how we can use technology to collaborate with others, we start to use that knowledge to collaborate with others. And in doing so, we're sharing that knowledge with others, and the pool widens. Another quote, one of my faves: if everyone's moving forward together, success takes care of itself. Henry Ford, he did okay. Made a couple of cars. He was a pretty switched on guy. Moving forward together is probably the most important part. Collaboration enables us to do that if done correctly. Okay, I want to pause now for another question for everyone on the call today. Again, feel free to unmute yourself or drop your thoughts into the chat box. What's one thing that's resonated for you today that you're going to try after this to boost collaboration in your workplace? Fantastic. Thanks, Lil. Be more curious with my team. I love the curiosity thing. Um, yeah, curiosity is a beautiful state to be in. And again, technology is one of the things that can help us maintain an aspect of curiosity by being able to communicate quickly, informally with our team, and also encourage them to share more with us. Thank you for that. All right. How are we going for time? Okay, time's nearly up. Time flies when you're having fun on a Wednesday. Happy Hump Day, by the way. So some helpful resources for you. By the way, we will be sending you a copy of these out. So don't stress if you don't have time to write them all down. I'll make sure that you get a copy of the presentation from today. Also, just wanted to mention quickly our ongoing monthly webinar series. So next month's webinar is on Wednesday, the 12th of August. The theme is developing and maintaining organizational culture. The challenge with that will be to try fit all of that into just 45 minutes, but that will be, for me, hugely interesting because I think given everything that's happened in the last 6 months or so around the world, organizational culture is being tested like never before. And, right now, I think some beautiful opportunities for all of us to think about where is our culture? Is it where we want it to be? Does it look and feel the way we want it to be? And if not, what can we do to move it in the right direction? So again, if you head over to our website, there'll be a link there that will enable you to register for that. I'd love to see you on that webinar as well. There's also a full schedule of all of our 2020 webinars on magicallearning.com/events. Ladies and gentlemen, again, immensely grateful for your time, for your engagement today. I am pretty much ready to wrap up, but I did want to open for any further questions. So if anyone does have a question, feel free again to drop it into the chat box or to unmute yourself. And whilst I'm holding out for questions, I just want to say thank you. And if you don't already connect or follow us online, we'd love for you to do that. We'd love to stay connected with you. And so please feel free to jump onto any of our social media channels if you feel that would be something helpful for you. In the absence of any further questions, I hope this session has been good for you. I hope you've got some value from it. Have an awesome Wednesday. Enjoy the rest of your week. Look forward to seeing you on one of our webinars again soon. So for me, it's bye-bye for now.